Ochihene Osajifo Amwetia of Repenning, former President Etrenana Nana Ado Danquah Akufo-Addo, Ochihima Nana Educhumwa Dokua, our former First Lady, Mrs. Rebecca Akufo-Addo, Deputy Minority Leader, colleague members of Parliament, the clergy, party leaders, family members, Nananum, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we gather in solemn remembrance and profound reflection as we mark 60 years since the passing of one of Ghana's most remarkable patrons, Dr. Joseph Boakye Danquah, who endured ultimate sacrifice for his love for his country and the freedom of her people. His legacy is woven into the fabric of Ghana's political, intellectual, and constitutional development. Dr. Danquah was more than a scholar, politician, statesman, and an advocate. He was a poet, a playwright, and a chronicler of our history, customs, and norms. He was a visionary who dedicated his life to laying the foundational principles of our democracy. Indeed, the principles of democratic accountability, free enterprise, free expression, and the rule of law, which are all today enshrined in the Fourth Republican Constitution, are the very ones that he fought for from the 1920s and died for in 1965. It is a statement of his foresight and that of the many others who share those ideals that the 1992 Constitution has given rise to the longest enduring democratic rule in Ghana's history. His journey from Bepon in Kyebi through his administrative work at the Repenning Palace here in Kyebi to the halls of the University of London was not merely a pursuit of personal academic excellence, but the epitome of African intellectual resilience and excellence. As a royal, legal practitioner, philosopher, historian, and a nationalist, he sought to shape a governance system of freedom and progress that reflected the pluralistic and cultural depth of our people. He foresaw what an independent Gold Coast represented, a role model for the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, and he was determined to see this future shaped strictly by the fundamental tenet of inclusive development in freedom. When Danquah speaks of liberating the energies of the people for the growth of a property-owning democracy in this land, with rise to life, freedom, and justice as the principles to which the government and the laws of the land should be dedicated in order to specifically to enrich life, property, and liberty of each and every citizen. Indeed, he means the goal should be to build a society of what he called addition, where every citizen has the opportunity and the privilege to create, grow, and enjoy the world in freedom and responsibly. His vision for Ghanaians remained the Ghana we all want and desire and deserve. Indeed, it's the reason why the mighty minority is firm in Parliament and holding the feet of the NDC to the fire. It is no wonder then that the Wasem Commission in 1948, the recommendation from which helped pave the way for Ghana's independence, acknowledged Danquah's towering leadership in the long push to end colonialism in the Gold Coast. The report read, quote, Dr. Danquah might be described as a doyen of Gold Coast politicians. He has founded or been connected with most political movements since his adolescence, unquote. This recognition reflects not only his pioneering role in political organization, but also his unwavering commitment to the political emancipation of the Gold Coast. Dr. Danquah's scholarship was pioneering. His work, The Akan Doctrine of God, challenged colonial narratives and asserted African cosmologies as deserving of scholarly attention. He was not merely an intellectual for academia's sake. His studies were meant to shape governance, policy, and national identity. It was his belief that democracy must be built on what he called Ghanaianism, a vision of shared national identity and unity among the diverse ethnic groups in the Gold Coast, rooted in the country's history, culture, and traditions, while also embracing modern democratic principles and governance. The key elements of his Ghanaianism are: 1. Cultural pride, unity in diversity, and self-determination and democratic values. The name Ghana was proposed by Dr. J.B. Danquah. Proud to independence, Dr. Danquah traveled to England to conduct extensive research on suitable name that will reflect the history, identity, and heritage of the people of the Gold Coast. He spent considerable time at the British Museum and other libraries, meticulously studying primary historical sources on the origins and traditions of the ethnic groups within the Gold Coast. Of course, we are called Ghana today because of the research and advocacy of Dr. Danquah. Through his scholarly investigations, Dr. Danquah discovered a historical connection between the people of the Gold Coast and ancient Ghana Empire. He argued that adopting the name Ghana would symbolize the strength, heritage, continuity of the origins of ancestral past, fostering a shared national identity and pride. The United Gold Coast Convention, formed in 1947, agreed to use the name Ghana upon independence. This proposal was ultimately accepted when the country attained independence in 1957. His role in the formation of UGCC was instrumental in setting Ghana on the path to independence. Dennis Austin, in his work Politics in Ghana, page 7, affirms Danquah's central role in conceptualizing and organizing the UGCC in these veritable words. Quote, "The idea of a new political movement was almost certainly that of Danquah. He was associated with several quasi political bodies, representative on the Cocoa Marketing Board for the Colony Farmers Movement, as well as joint provincial council and representative on the Legislative Council," end quote. This view is corroborated by Peter T. Omari in his book, Kwame Nkrumah, The Anatomy of Africa Dictatorship, emphasizing Dr. Danquah's organizational effort in the early stages of the UGCC's development. Omari states, quote, "The man who has organized the United Gold Coast Convention earlier that year, in April and May 1947, and who had been instrumental in launching it in August, was Dr. J.B. Danquah." In 1948, the consensus from the Watson's Commission report was that Ghana would achieve independence within 10 years. UGCC were for a peaceful transition to independence in the shortest possible time. Nkrumah and his Convention People's Party in 1949 called for independence now. Yet, we achieved independence in 1957 and became a republic 3 years after. Dr. Danquah championed a constitutional approach, one that safeguarded freedoms and built enduring institutions. This belief in the supremacy of the law made him a fierce opponent of unchecked political power, to a point that party and nation became one, with the Ghana flag being replaced by the flag of the CPP. When the Preventive Detention Acts of 1958 threatened the liberties he had fought for, Dr. Danquah stood firm in defense of justice. Though his challenge to the acts in court failed, his moral victory paved the way for future constitutional reforms, including the enshrinement of human rights and judicial independence in Ghana's post-1966 legal framework. His tragic death in detention in 1965 remains a somber reminder of the cost of tyranny and the unyielding price of defending a democracy. Beyond politics, Dr. Danquah embodied the delicate balance between tradition and modernity. As Trafo Hine of Achimibuakwa, he understood that traditional authority was not an impediment to development, but a crucial pillar of governance. He envisioned a Ghana where local traditions and national policies complemented each other rather than being at odds. His advocacy for decentralization remains ever relevant as we continue to grapple with governance structures that must both empower local communities and unify the nation. For decades, Dr. Danquah served as legal counsel to the Efutu states, passionately defending its land and its heritage. Today, the reconciliation roundabout in Winneba, where he and Dr. Nkrumah are immortalized in a handshake, serves as a powerful metaphor for our national journey, one marked by struggles, disagreement, and ultimately the pursuit of unity. It teaches us that true leadership requires not just vision, but the ability to bridge differences in service of the greater good. Dr. Danquah believed that knowledge was foundation of national progress. His tireless advocacy led to the establishment of the University of Ghana, an institution that has since become a beacon of academic excellence in Africa. His vision was for an enlightened citizenry, one that questions, innovates, and upholds democratic principles. In an era of misinformation and political apathy, his call for intellectual rigor and civic responsibility remains as crucial as ever. The principles for which Danquah fought are still relevant today. The rule of law, judicial independence, and the protection of individual freedoms must never be taken for granted. Recent incidents, such as a troubling raid on a former minister's residence, remind us of the fragile nature of our democracy. We must never allow the machinery of state power to operate beyond bounds of justice. The memory of Danquah demands that we remain vigilant, ensuring that democracy in Ghana is not just rhetorical ideal, but a lived reality. As I stand before you today, I cannot help but reflect on the weight of Dr. Danquah's legacy. His portrait in my office is more than a symbol. It is a daily reminder of the duty we bear as public servants, as citizens, and as inheritors of democracy. His life teaches us that opposition must be constructive, governance must be principled, and leadership must always be in service of the people. Dr. Danquah's story is not one of mere remembrance, but of responsibility. The best way to honor him is not with words alone, but with actions that protect the freedoms for which he lived and died. Let us commit ourselves to preserving justice, strengthening our institutions, and ensuring that no Ghanaian ever suffers that fate he endured. It is indeed a mark of the undeserving indignity and evil that Danquah still endures, that on the occasion of Parliament marking his 60th anniversary, a member of Parliament told a bold and naked lie that Dr. Danquah was a CIA spy. And to support this lie, he quoted from a book that rather nothing but praise for the doyen of Ghanaian politicians, the doyen of Ghanaian's politics. Danquah in his lifetime lamented over these lies against his person from his political opponent when he led effort to raise money from Britain to build Accra Sports Stadium. His opponent twisted it to say, apart from Nkrumah, Danquah and others in UGCC had been bribed to abandon the independence struggle for sports. In the end, we got both independence and the stadium, which still stands today. Danquah lamented how the front of the people, united for greater anti-colonial struggle, was split by those who split from the UGCC to become political opponents. Those who use populist, false propaganda to create unhealthy society of us against them. In his own words, the adversity in the struggle no longer was imperialism as such, but the well-to-do African, the professional man and the businessman, and a new class, the masses of the common people. It was made to appear that those who fortunately or unfortunately did not look common, but were in a way distinguished by wealth or learning or success in life, were enemies of the people and stooges of imperialism. Sadly, this old hate campaign is still with us today, fed daily with oxygen by those who should know better. Indeed, I dare say that perhaps since the 1940s, no group of people have suffered a hate campaign as enduring as that which Danquah and his people have had to go through. A people that have contributed so much to public service and the betterment of our nation, and yet maligned beyond measure for sacrifices pure and patriotic. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, let us yield here today with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that democracy is not a gift handed down through history, but a perpetual struggle, one that we must embrace with courage and resolve. Let us live here, denouncing hate's campaign, whoever and whichever group it may be directed at. Let us put the love and dignity of Ghana and Africa above all differences, because what unites us is far greater than the desire of those who seek to divide and weaken us. Dr. Danquah, in these veritable words, expressed his feeling about Ghana and the role he is to play. Quote, "I am now more than ever convinced that I have never known myself as my Maker knows me inside out. He fashioned me and has used me in his own fashion. And as I see it, the reason why I still live and breathe and I'm able to exert myself in life must be the simple one that my Maker hasn't quite finished with me yet. There are lots more he wants me to suffer and to use me for. I do not myself mind suffering, so long as it is not suffering for myself. To suffer for oneself is the emotions of all suffering. To suffer for others is the greatest spiritual elevation." End quote. This he wrote in October 1961. May the legacy of Dr. J.B. Danquah continue to inspire us, guide us, and challenge us to build a Ghana that truly upholds the principles of freedom, justice, and unity. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a piece from the Minority Caucus in Parliament, the mighty minority. Thank you very much.